here. Yeah, super excited to be here with you to chat about all things performance and energy, right? And we had a lot of great questions that were submitted from our community members, those that joined us live, and there are a lot of our participants that are catching the replay, right? And so we wanted to make sure that their voices were shared in this space in a way to learn a little bit more about your expertise and what your research or where your research has led you. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to read Dr. Wells' bio, which again doesn't do you justice for all the amazing things you do. I want to give you some time to add some more context to that, but I'll read what I have here. As a scientist and performance physiologist, Dr. Greg Wells has dedicated his career to exploring the limits of human potential and making scientific discoveries actionable for everyone. He currently works as a scientist in translational medicine at the Hospital for Sick Children, where he focuses on improving outcomes for children with chronic illnesses through physical activity. He is a best-selling author, with his most recent release being Powerhouse: Protect Your Energy, Optimize Your Health, and Supercharge Your Performance. Dr. Greg Wells, thank you for joining us. Again, excited to be in conversation with you. I think there are some amazing questions here. A lot of questions that our community members submitted that I was like, I actually would like to know the answers to some of these too. So before we hop into your work, I want to just maybe add some additional context to this discussion. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about what brought you to the work that you do as a performance physiologist, a scientist, athlete, and author. What brought you to this work?
Great and awesome to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. Grateful for everyone that showed up to hang out with us. It's super cool. So competitive swimmer growing up, sort of on track to make the Olympics, was at training camp in Florida, playing in the waves, got picked up, dropped on my head, broke my neck, did 3 months of traction, neurosurgery, months and months of rehab, ended up getting back into competitive swimming, swam through college, kind of up to World Cup level. All my friends made the Olympics. I didn't. I'm almost over it. But that sparked my interest in the human body. I then took kinesiology, went on to do a master's, PhD, a couple postdocs, and throughout all of that time studied human performance in physiology. So I've worked with the Olympic team for many, many years, but then in parallel also worked at the other end of the spectrum doing research in chronic illnesses, using exercise to help kids with chronic diseases like leukemia or cystic fibrosis. So I basically do the same thing, exercise physiologist, but I do it for people that are struggling with chronic illnesses or trying to win medals at the Olympics. And then I'm just taking all of that info and sharing it with people in the form of books and sessions like this, just to try to get as much health and wellness information out into the world as I can.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. And, one of the things I love to ask, especially with authors, and folks who have like a wealth of knowledge out in the world, right? What brought you to the point where you were like, hey, I'm ready for Powerhouse, this particular book to sort of be birthed or developed?
Yeah, this is book number 5, which probably gives my grade 8 English teacher a nervous breakdown if you think about where I came from. But anyway, we've got number 5 out into the world, and the genesis for this one was probably about 2 years ago, middle of the pandemic, various different lockdowns, but still talking to people, still doing virtual sessions like this, still trying to help. And I just found that everyone was exhausted. Everyone was so tired. Everyone was so burned out. I still think many of us feel like that right now. And I was like, okay, so fair enough. Everyone's tired, exhausted, burned out. What's the opposite of that? Lots of energy. Okay. How do humans create energy? Well, it comes from mitochondria, which are in all of the different cells of our body. You learned about it in grade 10 bio. Cool. If it's mitochondria, then is that something that we can change and influence? And it turns out that, yeah, we actually can. Mitochondria are hyper adaptable, for better or for worse. Actually, if we do things that don't help them, they get bad. But if we do things that do help them, they improve really, really quickly.
Yeah, and I think I love when our conversations just sort of flow in this way, because that actually sort of takes me to our first point or first question from one of our community members. And, we hear this conversation about energy so often, right? And we can talk about it on so many different levels. We can talk about it from a spiritual perspective, but from a rooted biological perspective, you tapped on this. What are we actually talking about when we're talking about our energy levels, right? Like, what functions in our body are we actually sort of referring to when we speak about, hey, I feel super energetic, or hey, I'm feeling a bit low energy?
Physiologically, and I'm a physiologist, that's where where my comfort zone is from a training perspective. Physiologically, energy is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's a molecule inside the body. When we break some of those chemical bonds, energy is released. And that is how we contract a muscle. That is how we create a thought. That is how we digest food. That's how we sweat. That's how we do everything that our body does, is through the breaking of ATP. The way that we get ATP back and replenish our energy stores is through nutrition. The way that we can deplete our energy stores is through things like stress. So there's all sorts of different ways in which we create and use energy, but the common point for all of it, where food flows through, where we recover and regenerate, where we help deal with inflammation, where we create those ATP molecules that we use for all of these activities in our life, the common pathway always comes down to, believe it or not, these little mitochondrial structures that are inside every single cell that we have, except red blood cells. They're in everything else. In your brain, they're in your muscles, they're in your white blood cells that fight off disease. The only thing that they're not in is red blood cells that carry oxygen.
Wow. Taking me back to these.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of taking you back, if you want me to take you way back, I can do that.
Yes.
Sexual, which is super fascinating because this stuff is really interesting. Like, we'll get out of grade 10 bio and just go deep into human history. So about 4 billion years ago, we read the latest thinking about how life actually developed on Earth. The idea is that there were these vents in the bottom of the ocean that were pumping out superheated water. And when that superheated water went out into the seawater at the time, there was differences in temperature. That difference in temperature created gradients of electricity and created gradients and differences in the chemicals that were in the water. Those gradients turned out to then become actually like solid. And that led to the creation of membranes. Those persist in our bodies today. And in the membranes of our cells, there's differences in temperature, chemistry, electricity. Then about 2 billion years ago, single-celled organisms began to emerge and plant life began to proliferate around Earth. Around 1.6 billion years ago, something really fascinating and very important happened. There were two types of cells on planet Earth. One used oxygen for energy. The other one used sugars. And the sugar-using cell ate the oxygen-burning cell. And instead of eating it and destroying it, they started working together. A symbiotic relationship was created. That led to a massive evolutionary advantage because that cell combination of the two could create energy under all conditions. And it turned out that that led to domination of Earth's life. Every single form of life on planet Earth today has both sugar and oxygen burning capabilities. The oxygen molecule or structure being mitochondria. So that's like, talk about taking it back. It actually goes way back, almost 4 billion years ago, and specifically around 1.6 billion years ago, to understand where mitochondria came from. It's a super cool history and very, very embedded in our health and well-being.
Yeah, thank you for providing that context and helping out. I'm just, you got my gears sort of going around this, where I'm like, so many questions, trying to keep it focused. But one of the spaces I want to take our conversation is, here at Muse, we talk a lot about meditation, we talk a lot about sleep, and we understand the importance there, but also knowing that we need to balance movement with those components. And so what I would ask you, and I love the context that you shared, that you work with people on both ends of the continuum, right? The idea of like working with people who have a particular level of chronic pain, and then also working with people who are moving into the space of like sports and performance in that way. If we came to the center ground, right, of like everyday person trying to figure out how to bring more intentional movement, and this is a question that sort of came up in our community chat, it's like, what are some everyday movements that are juicy enough to feel like it's helpful in our energy levels in that way?
Yeah, the beautiful thing about movement is that it sparks the creation of new mitochondria, and it stimulates the mitochondria that we have to get stronger and more powerful. And what we have discovered is that it really doesn't matter what type of movement that you do, any type of movement whatsoever sparks the creation of new and better and stronger mitochondria, leading to eventually more energy. One of the most powerful forms of movement that we can do is something we refer to as LSD. No one's like, what? LSD, the drug? No, not the drug, although that's, for a different conversation for a bit different day. LSD in the exercise context is long, slow distance. So rhythmic, repetitive activities. Go for a walk, go for a bike ride, go for a paddle, go for a ski, like whatever it happens to be that you can do that's rhythmic and repetitive and longer in duration supercharges the creation of new mitochondria. That leads to new blood vessels. That leads to a stronger heart. That leads to better blood. That leads to better lungs, a better brain. And so this mind-body connection and thriving can be sparked by something as simple as just going for a walk. But honestly, every type of exercise has benefits. Yoga, strength training, CrossFit, even gardening and housework count and make our bodies better.
Wow. What I'm taking from this is that once we're done, I need to go take my dog for a walk and to actually go for a longer sort of walk.
Your dog will thank you. Put on some music, get out there, go. Yeah. And when you feel like coming home, just look at your dog. And if they want to keep going, just follow the dog. They'll probably help you go a little bit further.
One of the questions I want to ask, and I want to preface this to say that we had a lot of questions about sleep, right? And rightfully so. But this is a shameless plug that next week, Dr. Wells will be joining us again for our conscious conversations to talk about the power of sleep. So Dr. Wells will be joining us with a panel, and we'll sort of go into more detail about how powerful sleep can be in that context and that perspective. Noah, who's working with us from customer care, if you can drop the link for the conscious conversations in the chat for the folk that might not have signed up yet. But I do want to sort of preface that conversation with a particular question around sleep. Now, and this was a question that was submitted from one of our community members. Is sleep the best way for us to sort of supercharge our performance and connect with maybe a deeper reserve of energy?
We think of sleep as the foundation for health and well-being and performance. It's one of the most fundamental tactics that we can use to improve our health. We know that sleep determines and influences cancer growth inside the body. Sleep's related to cardiovascular disease. It's related to mental health, depression, anxiety, mild to moderate mental health. So it's incredibly important. It's very closely implicated in neurodegenerative diseases and dementia and Alzheimer's. And one of the things that happens when we sleep is that the 100 billion neurons that we have inside of our brain shrink by about 60%. All the space opens up inside the brain. Clear fluid called cerebral spinal fluid washes through the brain every single night while we sleep, picks up viruses, bacteria, broken down cells, waste products, cleans all of that stuff out. That flows down into the lymphatic system of the body where it's cleaned and disposed of. So the brain literally washes itself out every single night while it sleeps, which leads to healthier, higher functioning neurons, which are the cells inside your brain, full of mitochondria, by the way, that create thinking, problem solving, concentration, focus, music, like everything that we do throughout the course of the day. The other really cool thing that happens when we sleep is that growth hormone is released. Growth hormone then circulates throughout the entire body, repairs and regenerates many different tissues, bones, muscles, internal organs. And so we can think of sleep as foundational for our energy in that that's when we repair, that's when we recover, that's when we regenerate, that's when we refuel. It's also when we learn and set the stage for creativity and problem solving and innovation type thinking. So it's foundational for us. Sleep is where we begin with when we think about trying to get healthier in a chronic disease situation. It's really important for all of us who have day jobs, who want to do well in our lives. Fortunately, if we're healthy, but it's also foundational for elite athletes. We know that elite athletes who don't sleep very well don't adapt to their training. Sleep is how we basically train with your eyes closed. So it's very, very important for all of us.
I want to pull us over towards another super popular question that was asked. This might be the number one question that was asked from our community. And this question was, how can we be more mindful of energy, health, and performance as we age? And I saw this question pop up in several different formats. So can you talk a little bit about, maybe best practices as our body begins to age and how we can sort of work with that?
I look at my 8-year-old son tearing around all day long with massive amounts of energy that seems boundless and never ending. And I now have to train just to try to keep up with him, which I'm not doing as well as I would like. So energy is really important for us. And obviously, as we age, and part of the aging process is sometimes we feel like we don't have as much energy as maybe we used to. Now, what we're also discovering about the aging process and aging in general is that aging is often experienced by us as less energy, or maybe not the same level of fitness that we had before, or maybe not as much muscle mass, or maybe we don't sleep as easily as we did when we were younger. But the reality is that is largely a function of how much general habitual physical activity we're getting throughout the course of the day. And so if we are more physically active throughout the course of the day, that will help us to positively adapt physiologically and slow down the aging process. Mitochondria, interestingly enough, actually help to regulate that and are involved in aging. When your mitochondria are functioning at a very high level, they provide energy for your tissues so that they can positively adapt all of the stimulus around us. When our mitochondria have been damaged, let's say by stress or chronic inflammation or chemistry or some other major challenge that we're faced with, unfortunately, that damages their ability to modulate how we age and can lead to premature aging. And so it always comes back to needing to do the basics right. Like, what improves our mitochondria? What slows down the aging process? Sleep is foundational. Physical activity is foundational. Super healthy eating can make a massive difference, especially if we get all those polyphenols and flavonoids from amazing, healthy, organic vegetables and fruit and stuff like that. And then obviously, of course, meditation and practices where we allow our mind and our brains to repair, recover, and regenerate as well can be very helpful for keeping our brains sharp and our neurons functioning at the highest possible level as well.
Mm. And I think this might be connected a bit, but this was probably the number 2 most popular question or maybe topic to talk about. But based on your research, what role does stress play and how does it affect our mitochondria and our energy?
I'm fascinated by the idea of hormesis. So hormesis is a technical term about stress that basically says that a little bit of stress is good for you and a lot of stress is not. So let's look at that. Let's say that we have psychological stress and there's a bout of you're faced with a challenge and it's really stressful and gets your adrenaline going and your cortisol is pumping and you work throughout the course of the day and you get the job done, you deliver the project. And then you go home at night and you have an amazing dinner with your family. Maybe you do a little bit of meditation, watch a movie, get a great night's sleep. If we alternate stress plus rest, that gives the body the time to shift its energy allocation to recovery, regeneration, and repair. The cool thing is that if there's that stress plus rest, then you actually adapt and get stronger because the body knows that it might get stressed again in the future and it will rebuild itself just slightly stronger than it was before. Think about going out and lifting weights. If you go lift weights, you're sore. You've broken down your muscle tissues. You've stressed your muscles. If you go home and get some good food and get some rest and get some sleep, you come back tomorrow, your muscles don't hurt anymore and you can lift just a little bit more. So when we do that stress plus rest, alternating back and forth, practicing hormesis, a little bit is good, a lot is not, then we get stronger, we get fitter, we get more resilient. The problem with stress is when it's chronic, it's unrelenting, it's never ending. Because then you never recover, you never repair, you never regenerate. Inflammation starts going up and staying up. Inflammation damages the surface of our mitochondria, impairing their ability to create energy. So you end up on this downward spiral. I want everyone to be on an upward spiral of wellness, if you will. And so whenever it comes to stress, we're looking at thinking about it from a perspective of hormesis. A little bit is good. It will stimulate to grow. It will challenge you to get better. But when it's chronic and unrelenting, that's problematic. And just think about the last 3 years. Constant, unrelenting stress, whether it's from us adapting to working at home and now adapting to working in a hybrid environment, maybe you're back full time. in the office, think about what our kids have been through around being in and out of school, the news cycle that's coming at us with COVID-19 headlines and war in Europe. Like, it's absolutely relentless. So it's very, very important for us right now to think about our stress levels and give ourselves permission to take a break, permission to rest, permission to recover, to recharge, have those great meals, do the meditation, go for the walk, go to the park, turn off your phone, get off social media, and give yourself a chance to, just bring yourself back into balance again. So stress is powerful, can be super beneficial, but we've got to manage it very, very carefully.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for broaching the conversation in that perspective, because I think a lot of times in many spaces, the conversation around stress is like stress bad, like relaxing good, right? And you get into binaries around what that looks like. But in reality, there are types of stress that are helpful for us. It's, to your point, it's when we don't give ourselves opportunities to rebound back into that relaxation. Like, we engage with the stress, come back, rest, relax, restore in some way, and then go back out and connect in that way. But I appreciate you broaching the conversation from that way, because I don't think it's always shared from that perspective.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think of it. Let's go to the extreme of, like, if you rested all the time, you would be very bored, right? It's just, there's nothing going on. You're on the couch all the time. I love binge watching the occasional show. I've been there, done that. Stranger Things was awesome, all one day. But if you're there all the time, just chilling on the couch, that gets boring. That's not good for you. You need some challenge. You need some spark. You need some things to overcome, some things to shoot for, some things to work through, some things to learn. That's stress, and that's how we grow. The problem is that when we are hyper stressed at work, and maybe you come home and the relationship with the person that you're living with isn't awesome, so it's stressful at home, and then you get a chance to sit down and scroll through your phone. You just happen to look at the news headlines, and you're like, the world is collapsing around me. That's when we get into a difficult state, right? That's when you need to think about work and being world class at what you need to do, but then recovering and regenerating, making sure that we're surrounded by people that we love who support us, making sure that we practice the media psychology effect and control the inputs into our brain, podcasts, news. We know what influencers are we following to make sure that they elevate us, then make sure that they bring us up. Thinking about who we're connected with and who has access to our thinking is very, very important. And when we alternate challenges around stress with periods of growth, amazing things can happen. If you even think about it in terms of this huge interest that everyone has right now in cold water immersion, like and I do it lots. I live in Toronto. I live right next to the lake. I go in the lake all the time, all through the winter. I was in yesterday. It was very cold here in Toronto, Canada. There was ice on the ground and all sorts of stuff. Went in the water because I know that if I stress my body with a little bit of cold, 2 to 3 minutes, and then get back out into a nice warm bath and shower, I'm alternating that stress plus rest. And that's fantastic, according to research, for my nervous system, getting me out of the fight or flight response and into that rest, recover, and regenerate response. The same thing is true. You don't have to jump into a cold lake. You can take a hot bath. Heat shock proteins work exactly the same way. A little bit of heat is awesome, but a lot of heat makes you hypothermic and you die, right? A little bit of cold is good. A lot of cold is bad. You die. Hypothermia. So it's just a great practice for us to get into moderation, to get into balance, and to give ourselves permission that it's okay. Sometimes we're stressed, but then we're going to take the time and give ourselves permission to truly take the time to repair, recover, and regenerate.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing the science behind the cold water plunges. I've seen how much it's picked up in a lot of spaces, and I was like, I don't think I get it, but I was like, maybe it's not for me to get. But yes, thank you for explaining that. That was something that I always thought about. I was like, I wonder what's behind this.
What is going on there? Yeah, no, I've done we did a research study on that in my lab at U of T a few years ago with track athletes. We asked them to do these exercises and got them completely sore, completely broken down, and then put them either onto a chair or into an ice bath with a couple different temperatures, a couple different durations. And we found it was beneficial for them in terms of reducing inflammation and speeding recovery so that they could train again the next day. However, if you're in the water for too long, it has the opposite effect. If you're in water that's too cold, it has the opposite effect. So there's optimization with all of this. And it's always around balance. Like, it's cold, not freezing. It's get in the water for a few minutes, not for 20 minutes. So we found sort of 5 minutes at 5 to 10 degrees was the optimal, 5 to 10 degrees Celsius for those of us. I apologize. I think that's like in and around 40 Fahrenheit, but someone should check my numbers on that one. So somewhere in and around that zone seems to work really, really well. When you pair cold water immersion with breath work, people have probably heard of that in terms of like the Wim Hof method or something. Breath work has very powerful effects as well. I almost think of breath work like the new meditation, because we breathe automatically. You don't need to think about it. But if you consciously change your breathing, you can affect your nervous system. Cold water affects your nervous system. So does breath work. Right. So when we take those long, slow birthday candle breath exhales, that calms our nervous system down and helps us to relax. It's powerful right now. It's instantaneous in its effect. Similarly, actually on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you do short, fast, sharp exhales, like you see athletes doing on the starting line, right? That's going to psych you up and get you fired up and, agitated and activated. Great for hitting a tennis ball super hard, not so good for having a conversation with a loved one, right? So we can definitely play and experiment with breath work as well. And all of these things work together if you do it right to maybe get healthier and improve your life and improve your mindset.
Nice. And I'm gonna tap into our next question, but what I want to say is one, Noah, thank you, great fact checker. He dropped
Thank you.
41
to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Appreciate it. Thanks, buddy. You got my back. That's good.
You got us. One, I want to say, if you do have questions based on the conversation so far, feel free to drop it in the Q&A section. We're moving closer to that. So there are some specific questions that you want asked. Please drop it in the chat for us. But what I want to do is I want to pull on the thread around the nervous system a little bit more, because there's a lot of conversation now when we talk about like the nervous system. There's a lot of expansion happening around polyvagal theory and co-regulation, all of these sort of things, right? This idea that, the more and more we're around people, we sort of pick up on that in terms of like energy levels and nervous system syncing, all of that kind of stuff. But I guess I want to share, based on your research, is there more information or data around how our energy levels are influenced by those that we share space with? This was actually another really popular question of people, sort of asking like, how do I sort of work with it when I'm maybe living with or around or in situations that are super stressful? Are there ways that I can sort of manage that? So maybe if you can talk a little bit about how those we share space with have an influence on our nervous system or in our energy levels in general?
Yeah, let's start with energy. So if I think about it in terms of purely ATP, right? ATP production, that's largely regulated by the foods that you eat, your mitochondrial health, and the type of exercise that you are doing. However, if you're stressed, stress causes inflammation. Stress damages your mitochondria. So if you're constantly stressed by the people around you, ultimately your energy levels will eventually drop because you have a lower capacity to create ATP via your mitochondria. So choosing the people that you spend time with is absolutely critical. My friend, Dr. James Rouse in Colorado, often says you have your family of birth and your family of choice, and they don't necessarily have to be the same thing. Many of us, many people have challenges around the people that are close to us in our space. And if you think about it, every movie ever made is about challenging family dynamics, right? Like Luke Skywalker had issues with his dad. So, there's stuff that we all have to sort of navigate and deal with. But what we really want to try to do is surround ourselves with people who elevate us, people who support us. And what I often say is like, think about the dream team theory, right? Who are the 5 people who elevate you at work, in your professional life? Who are 5 people that you need to spend more time with, want to spend more time with, that you elevate and they elevate you? In your personal life, who are the 5 people that you want to spend more time with, who elevate you? Maybe who are 5 people in your family that you need to be spending more time with? And that is a great way to control the inputs into your psychology. There's a theory called the media psychology effect that shows that the media that you consume has a powerful effect upon the regions of your brain that become activated, stronger, and eventually grow more neurons. So it's not just the people that we actually interact with, but it's also what books are you reading? What podcasts are you consuming? What influencer content are you consuming on social media? And also, what are you putting out into the world as well? So it's important for us to think about and manage this and spend the time to journal and consider and direct our attention and energies towards the people who elevate us, and maybe protect ourselves a little bit and say no from time to time to the energy vampires who bring us down. We dig into the physiology of it. Yes, it's probably due to stress, inflammation, mitochondria, energy. But there's also amazing research that shows that our overall mortality, that's your risk of dying from cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, neurodegenerative diseases, all of it, is highly related to the strength and positivity of your social connections, even more so than quitting drinking, even more so than being physically active, even more so than doing exercise or cardiac rehab after a heart attack, right? So it is incredibly powerful. By the way, that drives me nuts because I'm an exercise physiologist. I think exercise is the answer to everything. No, apparently my friends are more important than my workouts. So I could have skipped the workout and gone for a beer with my buddies, but yeah, there's all of these things to consider. That's right. Oh yeah, no, let's go for beers after this. Anyway, lots there, and hope that's a little bit helpful for people.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I want to, highlight something that you shared in your book, and I want to mention this. We're going to actually do a random raffle of Dr. Wells' book. So stay tuned for that closer towards the end of our time together. So somebody will be leaving here with a copy of Powerhouse. But in Powerhouse, you mentioned the 100-day mitochondrial challenge, right? So can you talk a little bit about what that is, and talk about what that is, and maybe how our community members can tap into that.
The amazing thing about our health and well-being is that wherever we are right now is where we are. And so if we consider that the past is unchangeable, nothing you can do about it, it is what it is. We are where we are today. And so if we practice radical self-acceptance, complete and thorough, we are where we are. Love yourself. We've been through a lot. Here we are today. The cool thing is that about every 6 months, the human body changes based upon the foods that you're eating, your genetics, and what you do and what you think and what you absorb and what you consume. And 98% of your cells are new about every 6 months. You get billions of new mitochondria every single day. We have I think it's 100,000 trillion mitochondria, like the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Like that's how many mitochondria we have in our bodies, but we're constantly producing new ones. And your brain is plastic. It changes. We've all heard of the idea of neuroplasticity, right? The brain changes. Bioplasticity, the body changes. And so depending upon what we do, you can basically have a new body and new brain a couple times a year. So the 100-day mitochondrial challenge revolves around, let's take the next 100 days and do little tiny micro wins on a daily basis to spark the creation of new and better mitochondria and to make the mitochondria that we have stronger and better performing. So little tiny things like drinking more water. Your mitochondria use water to create energy. That'll give you more energy. Go for a little walk. 3 minutes is enough, according to research, to improve your physiology. Do some meditation. 3 minutes of meditation grows stronger white matter tract connections deep inside the brain. So we don't need to do massive things. We need to do little tiny things consistently. So at the back of the book, the final chapter is literally a 100-day protocol. It's like day 1, do this. Day 2, do this. And we kept it ridiculously simple because I want it to be massively accessible for everyone and easy to do. And that's what we wanted people to do. And we also know that research from University College of London shows that it takes anywhere from 20 to 120 days to install new habits, average being about 66. So we sort of went to the higher end of that and thought that 100 days would be a great period of time for us to work on improving our health and well-being and ultimately end up with a fitter, stronger, healthier, happier you in 3 to 6 months.
Nice. That's I'm just excited to Barbara mentioned, she kind of took the words out of my mind in the chat. She said, such great information, new body and new brain. Yes, I had no idea that sort of process happens so frequently with us. And she actually asked another question. Barbara is amazing. She's one of our meditation teachers in app, and she's always joining us in our community offerings. She asked this question: what are 3 things that you do daily that I guess helps and contributes to that level of balance and health?
Thank you, Barbara. Let me first start by saying, like, I'm not perfect. I'm a work in progress, and I have good days and I have bad days. I poured coffee all over myself right outside of a television interview this morning. So like, there's some moments where things rock in my mornings, and mornings where things are a little bit off the rails. But we're here today with all of you guys. So I will say here a few things that I've been doing lately that make a huge difference for me. One of them is breath work. And I found that practicing smooth, relaxed, focused, mindful breathing really helps to bring my attention into the present moment. And I feel myself being brought back down from beta into alpha, maybe even theta brainwave mode, the calm, cool, collected modes, which is great for me because, as you may be able to detect, I run pretty hot. Like I'm pretty go, and I've got all of that mindset to deal with, but that's been super helpful for me. Another thing that's been very, very helpful is thinking deeply about my transitions during the day, because I've got kids, I've got Judith, my wife, and I've got work. And when I'm at work, I'm like this, hyper, activated. Let's go, everyone, change the world. Come on, it's great. Like Greg functions up here. My wife, Judith, is a acupuncture, massage, chiropractor, like that type of calm, cool, collected, gentle, easy music, one-on-one coaching, love, compassion, right? So Greg at work and Judith at work, very different. And when Greg comes home from work up here and Judith's coming home and she's down here with the kids, I need to go, oh, okay, one more. And then go for a walk, do a workout, do my meditation. And so transitions for me have been massive, just to make me better able to interface with the ones that I love in a very positive way. And then Judith and I have been working a lot on eating healthy, to be honest with you. Like, we're really trying to be as organic as we can. You don't need to eat organic, but it's just one of the things that we are working on as a family, because 8 and 12 years old, they're eating a lot of food. Judith's training for running. I'm trying to get back into Ironman style of training as well. So nutrition has been a big focus for us. Previously, it had been sleep. We've got that kind of dialed in at the moment. But yeah, breath work, transitions, and healthy eating, I would say, are probably the biggest focuses that I have at the moment. In addition, I'm back in the pool and swimming again. I'm really loving that. So that's kind of my workout stuff, but I'll leave that to my coach to figure out. I just jump in the water and do whatever he tells me to do. Hope that's helpful.
I think that was super, super helpful. I want to tap into one of the questions that was dropped in the chat. Where did it go? Emily mentioned, where can we find the 100 days challenge that we just talked about? And I'll just say that it's in Dr. Wells' new book, Powerhouse. Just so, because I know our conversation has sort of been framed around the book, but do you want to talk a little bit more about the book itself, and sort of what people can expect for those that'll go out and pick it up, which you should go out and pick it up. But yeah, what can people expect?
Emily and everyone else, the 100-day challenge is at the back of the book. The book's called Powerhouse. There are 4 main sections to the book. The first section is breathe. Talk a lot about breath work, the physiology behind it. I actually did my PhD on breathing 20 years ago.
Wow.
No one wanted to know about breath work 20 years ago. Now it's having its moment. So I was like, woohoo, I get to write about breath finally. So the first chapter is on breath work. Second chapter is on move, exercise, physical activity. Then we get into energy, which is all that hormesis stuff we talked about earlier. And then thriving, which is just practical ideas to get out of this languishing state that we're all in and back into flourishing and joy. So it's breathe, move, energize, thrive. We finish with the 100-day mitochondrial challenge. It's at the back of the book. There's a link also that when you can sign up and get the emails delivered to you on a daily basis, be like, hi, Greg, today, breathe, right? Just like simple things will drop in your email every single morning. So that link is in the book. And so happy to also share that. I'll look it up and see if I can get it into the chat quickly before we sign off. But I'm really happy with it. Most of my books I haven't enjoyed. This is number 5. Like I published them and I'm like, it could have been better. And then 2 years later, I'm like, no, that was really good. This one, I'm actually really happy with it off the start, which is totally unusual for me. So I feel good about this one. I feel like it's a book that's very helpful right now, given what the world is going through and how burned out and fatigued and tired everybody is. Not everyone, but a lot of people are struggling with it. So I'm proud of it. I'm happy with it, and I'm hopeful that it helps people out a lot. And while you ask me the next question, I'm going to look up the link.
Yeah,
make sure I get it right.
No worries. This is a question I love to ask, especially like researchers who are sort of moving with their work. And I want to ask you, just based on what we've experienced over the last 3 years with the pandemic and things that you've noticed, are there particular areas that you see yourself moving into or looking to study a little further, sort of based on where we are socially in the world at the moment?
Yeah. One of the things that fascinates me right now, I don't think we're there yet, but we're getting closer, is personalized medicine. So using your DNA to inform treatment for various different conditions. Also potentially using your DNA to inform your nutritional choices. I think it's way down. I don't think we're there at all right now. So I'm really interested in that. That's fascinating to me. I'm also really interested in the potential use of artificial intelligence to help us with our health and well-being, accessing 192,000 years worth of knowledge instantaneously is, again, we're not there even remotely close. Like I wouldn't trust ChatGPT with my health right now. When I asked ChatGPT, who's Greg Wells? It was like, he's an author. He wrote The Ripple Effect. Yes. Rest, Focus, Recharge. Yes. And then some soft porn book I've never heard of in my life. So that was like, no, probably, maybe wish I had. It's probably sold way more copies than any of my books have. So you can't trust it yet, but we're there. We're getting there. We're going down that road maybe in the future. So I'm fascinated by those tech issues. But whenever I get down that rabbit hole, I always return to the fact that, well, even if ChatGPT or any type of AI can scrape the entire internet, what is it going to find? You're going to need to sleep well. You're going to need to eat real food that you recognize as food. You're going to need to have a great community around yourself of people who elevate you. And you're going to need to be physically active. Like these are universal human truths. And so I go down the tech road because I'm sort of inclined to go that way. It fascinates me. But every time that I do, I always end up coming back to the unsexy, very simple basics that make a massive difference in people's lives, which I think can be helpful for everyone, watching, is that, if you see information coming at you on the internet that seems extreme, that seems sort of out there, that seems like clickbait, it probably is. And so just get back to basics, return to simple physiology, return to foundational psychology, because at the end of the day, we all have a body, and there's some universal human truths in here that we can leverage. And I think that can make probably the biggest difference for us, is keep it super simple. But if you ask me, like, what am I interested in? Definitely tech, but it always points me right back to the same place again.
Thank you I appreciate that share of like coming back to basics, because I'm with you. I see so many, with the algorithm, it's sending and sharing so many different, like, this is the best way to get well and get better. And it's like, well, let me move, let me sleep, let me hang out with good people, and let me eat good food. Like it's coming back to the foundations. It's like you can't go wrong there.
Yeah. And like, we're the only species on the planet that needs a food guide to tell us what to eat, right? Like we know what's good for us. And so like chips taste great, not good for you. Ice cream, I love ice cream, not good for you. It's a treat. It's not an everyday thing, right? So the foundation for all of us is straightforward. Like the reason why I'm associated with Muse is because universal human truth. We've been doing and been training as humans on meditation for at least 5,000 years. Like this has been well established as something that's good for us, so we can go down that road. So I like to keep it simple, but at the same time, I'm curious. I'm super curious. I love exploring how I can use wearable technology to track my sleep so that when I make changes, I can see how I am doing. I'm fascinated by exploring heart rate variability as a way for me to track and measure my stress levels. So if I maybe do some meditation, I can see, is my nervous system calming down? So I love using tech to inform me, But at the same time, I always hedge my learning against the trusted web of people that I know and appreciate, and I believe that their information is correct, into keeping my decisions really, really simple and straightforward.
Thank you. Dr. Wells dropped in the chat the link to the 100-day challenge. So make sure you go in and click that link. Noah, if you can actually add in Dr. Wells' other forms of contact, please share that in the chat too, so folks can be in contact and in conversation with him. I'm going to go back up. Maria mentioned a comment. She said, Dr. Wells, I had my blood tested to see what foods I'm sensitive to, and I've healed the arthritis, which was starting in my body in the 50s. She said, the cost is a lot of money, but it actually worked really well. And then
Glad to hear that. That's awesome. Good job.
Yeah. And then Nicholas mentioned Powerhouse was released on Audible yesterday. So yeah.
It wasn't me that read it, but the guy who read it has a way better voice than I do. So that's for your benefit. So if you like to listen to books when you're driving and attend traffic university, as we refer to it, then I'd be honored to share your commute with you if you wanted to listen to the book on Audible. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. Emily has a great question. I think you started to tap on this in your last response. Have you had the opportunity to use neurofeedback or biofeedback during your journey? If so, what changes have you gotten to physically see?
Got it. I like that question. We've been doing some biofeedback work for many years. I'm opening my iPad here because I have a slide that perhaps I can show you. So many years ago, when I was working with Olympic athletes and preparing for either a training camp or the Olympics, we would look at things like resting heart rate. And when you wake up in the morning and you measure your heart rate with your fingers for 60 seconds using your stopwatch, and you track that over time, you can get a really good sense of your fitness level. You can get a really good sense of your stress level. You can tell whether or not you're about to get sick. Obviously, you can track the menstrual cycle. And so we would do that leading into altitude training or after traveling to the Olympics and you're preparing for that competition. So we've used that type of biofeedback from heart rate for decades, well established. It works really, really well. And we think that it provides us with some pretty good information. So I'm just looking up this slide. There it is. I'll switch over to that in a second. Now we have access to something called heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is when your brain sends signals down through the spinal cord. Your spinal cord innervates the heart. And so if you are stressed, the signals to your heart increase and your heart starts beating faster. So your heart's very sensitive to psychological stress. You probably know this, right? Like you get startled and your heart beats harder, or you're having a difficult conversation, your heart will beat harder. If your brain is relaxed, the signals coming down the spinal cord are more random. So as a result, your heart beats innately, not because of a drive. And the heart might beat like beat, 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 beat. It's a very random and variable. So when we are relaxed, heart rate variability is high. When we are stressed, lots of signals coming down from the brain into the body, your heart's like beat, 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 right? Very, very rhythmical. And there is no variability. That happens when we run too, for example. So I've been fascinated lately about heart rate variability and tracking that. We've built an app. It's called Vivio. If you have an Apple Watch, you can check it out. I'll drop the link in the chat. And this is some data that I got from it. So when I was tracking my own heart rate variability over the course of the day, I woke up and I looked at some of my email and I was like, so you could see that I was my heart rate variability was low. So I did some breath work, did my morning routine. My heart rate variability went back up. I'm relaxed, ready to start my day. Worked, got a bunch of stuff done, and I was a little bit stressed, totally okay. I was getting stuff done, right? I was doing what I do, but got a little bit tired. Went for a walk in nature at lunch. You can see I recovered and regenerated during that time. Got back to work in the afternoon, a couple more blocks done, pushed right through to the finish line around 4 o'clock, completely spent, did meditation to finish my day to bump my HRV back up before I went in and started to, interface with my family. So I've been using heart rate variability to track like what's the effective cold water immersion, sauna, massage, breath work, meditation, mindfulness, nature, and explore all of that. So in terms of biofeedback and neurofeedback, definitely using that tool because it's so accessible. Fitbit, has that. Garmin has it. Apple Watch has it. Many different apps have it. And of course, Muse headbands enable you to track neurofeedback to look at your ability to move from beta brainwave mode, which is that hustle, focus, execute, stress, performance zone, down into alpha brainwave states, which is your strategic thinking, learning state, and even down into theta brainwave state, which is your creativity, ideation zone as well. So I like the tools because they give me a little bit of feedback about what I'm doing and if it's working. So those are the two that I've been experimenting with. Apple Watch plus Vivio, many different things that you can use around that. And then Muse as well for some of the brain work in and around the meditation that I'm doing. I hope that's helpful. And Whoop does HRV as well. Alan asks what devices measure HRV the most accurately. They're all getting pretty good now. If you compare any of them to each other, they're different. If you compare any of them to a lab, they are different. So the validity is meh. But if you compare you to yourself using the same device, they're very accurate. So the reliability is excellent. So if you're using whatever device for you to track you over time and you see changes, you can be relatively assured that that's actually a change due to you and or something that you are doing, not the device itself. So keep it in context, like they're not lab quality. Don't compare them to each other. But if you're using the device for you, comparing you to yourself as you try various different things, I think you can be reasonably assured that you're getting reasonably good data for that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Listen, Dr. Wells, thank you. This is just a great conversation. I'm excited because technically there's kind of like a part 2 next week. So I'm excited to be in conversation with you some more, along with our great panel as we sort of dive in to the conversation of sleep and how it can affect our performance as well. So I want to just say thank you for taking the time to